My name is Riley Dawson, and the night my brother laughed in my face like I was the family's personal punchline, something in me snapped so cleanly it felt surgical. He joked about me being jobless. His friends piled on. They thought I was harmless. They thought I had nothing. What none of them knew was that every single one of those loudmouths worked for a company I built from the ground up. By sunrise, they'd learn exactly who signs their paychecks and who can end them. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button. Subscribe and type "interested" in the comments, and I will give you a heart. The night my brother publicly humiliated me in our mother's living room didn't start like a disaster movie, but it definitely ended like one. I walked into that house expecting a normal family gathering. Awkward small talk, bland appetizers, the usual subtle competition disguised as affection. Instead, I walked into a firing squad, a room full of people who had already decided they knew exactly who I was and what I wasn't. Ethan, my older brother, the family's reigning golden child, was holding court in the center of the room like he was some kind of off-brand celebrity. His friends circled around him, beer bottles in hand, laughing way too hard at jokes that weren't funny when he made them at 15 and certainly hadn't improved with age. The second he saw me, that smug grin crawled across his face. "Well, look who finally showed up," he shouted, acting like the entire living room was a stage and he was headlining the show. "Still jobless, Riley? Must be nice having absolutely nothing to do all day." His friends exploded with laughter, slapping each other like toddlers high on sugar. One of them actually pointed at me. Pointed, like I was an exhibit in a zoo labeled "Unsuccessful Sibling, Rare Species." I didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. I just stood there, letting the moment stretch, letting the stupidity hang in the air like a bad smell only I seemed to notice. Inside, something shifted. Not anger, not embarrassment, more like a click. A quiet, precise, oh-so-calculated click, like the sound of a chess piece being set down. Checkmate before anyone realizes the game's over. Because while my brother was performing for his friends, bathing in their attention, he didn't know the one detail that mattered most. Every single person laughing worked for me. Not metaphorically, not in some spiritual sense, literally, on payroll, with benefits. I was their employer, their boss, their CEO technically, though barely anyone knew that. Certainly not my family, and definitely not Ethan. See, about 3 years earlier, I founded a software company in Seattle. Not a flashy, overnight success story. A real company built from exhaustion, missed weekends, cheap coffee, and one too many panic attacks. I kept my identity quiet on purpose. Public filings listed a holding entity and a registered agent. My executive team handled most day-to-day operations. I only stepped in for strategy, investor calls, and hiring decisions that actually mattered. But those people, the ones laughing at me like I was a charity case, they were mid-tier hires, sales staff, customer support, a couple junior project coordinators, the type who'd fail upward if no one stopped them. They didn't know their founder, didn't know what I looked like, didn't know my name, and I had preferred it that way. Until tonight. I watched their laughter, their smug little smirks, their eagerness to impress Ethan, who they thought was their peer, their equal, maybe even future management material. They had no idea how ironic that was. No idea what I knew. No idea what was coming. My mother called out from the kitchen, trying to soften the tension with her usual brand of sugar-coated denial. "Ethan, be nice to your sister," she said, laughing like his insult was a harmless family joke. "She's just figuring things out." Figuring things out. That line hit harder than Ethan's mockery. She said it the same way people describe toddlers learning to walk or retirees taking up pottery. As if I'd been floating through life waiting for the universe to hand me a purpose. Meanwhile, the company I'd built, quietly, strategically, relentlessly, was generating revenue that would make her stop mid-sentence if she ever saw the numbers. But the funniest part? Ethan had no idea that the job he bragged about, the sales position he killed it at, the one he claimed the company couldn't function without, that job existed because I created it. The department he said he practically led, I wrote the structure, the commission model, the onboarding flow he bragged about optimizing. I designed it on a whiteboard at 3:12 a.m. while eating stale pretzels and questioning my life choices. And I had hired him. Not directly, of course, that would have ruined the fun, but when my mother begged me to help him out, I asked my recruiting team to open a slot in sales. I let him interview anonymously. I refused to give him special treatment. He got the job on his merits, not knowing his little sister, his jobless, aimless, ambitionless sister, was the one who greenlit his offer. Watching him joke about carrying the company while unknowingly working under my leadership was entertaining at first, but tonight the entertainment ended. After his comments, Ethan strutted off, high-fiving his friends like he just delivered a TED Talk on how to be an insufferable sibling. I scanned the room. Their faces told me everything. Not one of them questioned him. Not one of them wondered if his comment was cruel or unnecessary. Not one of them hesitated. They laughed because they thought they could, because they thought I was powerless, because they thought this house, this childhood battlefield, still defined me. But that was the moment I decided something important. I wasn't going to correct them. I wasn't going to defend myself. I wasn't going to tell them who I really was. I didn't need their approval. I needed their silence. And the fastest way to achieve silence is with consequences. I smiled, a calm, deliberate smile that none of them recognized but would remember for the rest of their lives. Then I set down my glass gently, like I was placing a bookmark in a story about to get violently interesting. I turned towards the door, not in anger, but in absolute clarity. Because the second I stepped outside and closed it behind me, everything changed. Not tomorrow, not someday, tonight. Ethan had mocked me for being jobless. By morning, he'd wake up unemployed. And he wouldn't be alone. His whole little entourage would follow him out the door. Not out of pettiness, not out of spite, out of principle. Because there are two types of power: the kind people brag about, and the kind people only notice when it hits them like a freight train. And I was done hiding mine. If you were in my shoes, would you have walked out too? Or blown up the entire room on the spot? When I stepped out of that house, the cold air slapped me harder than Ethan's mockery ever could, but it also cleared my head. I didn't need revenge fueled by emotion. I needed revenge fueled by precision. The kind of precision that rewrites an entire narrative so quietly that when people finally realize what happened, it's already too late to undo. And the thing about precision is, it requires honesty, brutal honesty. Not about them, about me. Because the truth is, I didn't build a tech company out of pure genius or raw talent or some mythical Steve Jobs moment. I built it out of being tired of being overlooked, tired of being the afterthought, tired of being the sibling no one expected anything from. Growing up, our house had an unspoken scoreboard. Ethan always started the game 10 points ahead simply by walking into the room. He won awards for showing up. I worked twice as hard to be noticed half as often. When I got my first internship in college, my mother told me, "That's nice, honey, but you know Ethan just got promoted, right?" When I graduated with honors, Ethan got a new car. When I raised my first small round of funding, Mom said, "A startup? But what about a real job?" So I stopped reporting achievements. I stopped feeding their dismissal with my milestones. I stopped offering them information they'd only use to propagate the myth of Ethan the exceptional. My silence wasn't resignation, it was strategy. I learned something early. If people underestimate you long enough, you can build an entire empire in the blind spot of their arrogance. And that was exactly what I'd done. But keeping that empire quiet came with consequences. People, even well-meaning ones, assume the worst when they can't categorize you. Ethan's friends didn't laugh at me because they were evil. They laughed because I didn't fit the version of me they'd invented. And that version, it was convenient, harmless, powerless, someone they could mock without imagining repercussions. That illusion ended tonight. Still, as I walked to my car, I forced myself to slow down. Revenge requires pacing. Too fast, you look emotional. Too slow, you look unsure. But just right, you look inevitable. I sat inside, turned the engine on but didn't drive. Instead, I opened my phone and texted the one person in my company who knew the truth about me, Lauren Park, my COO. Smart, sharp, and allergic to nonsense. If a tornado had a brain and a law degree, it would look like her. She picked up on the second ring. "Riley, it's late. What's wrong?" There was a beat of silence before her voice lowered. "What happened?" I didn't give her the emotional version. I gave her the operational version. "There are issues with the sales floor," I said, voice steady, "and with several people in Ethan's social circle. I want you to prepare all performance files tied to that group for immediate review." Lauren didn't ask why. She didn't gasp dramatically. She didn't even say Ethan's name. She simply replied, "Understood, I'll have everything ready in the morning." Professionalism like that is rare. That's why she's the only person who knows I'm her boss. When I hung up, I leaned back and let the weight of the night settle. I didn't want to fire Ethan because he hurt my feelings. I wanted to fire him because he compromised the culture I built. That's what most people misunderstand about leadership. The real power isn't in hiring, it's in removing the wrong people before they poison the foundation. Ethan's poison was subtle, entitlement disguised as confidence. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Most people hadn't shown up yet, so the building felt calm, almost peaceful. If last night was the storm forming, this morning was the sky tightening right before lightning strikes. I walked through the lobby unnoticed. Employees saw me sometimes and assumed I worked in product or operations. Some nodded politely, some didn't acknowledge me at all. It didn't bother me. Mistaking the founder for a regular staff member is only insulting when the founder needs validation. I didn't. On the elevator ride up, I prepared myself. Revenge wasn't emotional work, it was administrative. When the doors opened, the familiar hum of the office greeted me. Keyboards clicking, fluorescent lights buzzing, small talk bubbling from the break room. I headed straight for the glass conference room where Lauren was already waiting. She had 3 folders open, color-coded, tabbed, and organized so thoroughly it almost looked artistic. "These are the files you asked for," she said, sliding them toward me. "Performance reviews, HR notes, internal complaints." She paused. "You might want to read this one last." She tapped a red folder. A red folder meant bad. I opened Ethan's folder first. Not bad. Worse. Subtle complaints, poor leadership behavior, inconsistent numbers, and a note from HR recommending monitoring, which was corporate speak for "we're watching him, but we hope he fixes himself so we don't have to deal with it." I closed the folder and exhaled, slowly, deliberately. Then I opened the second folder, one of Ethan's friends. Even worse, a pattern of comments that bordered on harassment. Late arrivals, missed deadlines, untouchable arrogance. Then folder 3, someone I barely knew, terrible, unacceptable, fireable. But then Lauren gently slid the red folder toward me. I opened it slowly, and my stomach dropped. Not out of fear, out of confirmation, because inside that folder was something worse than incompetence, worse than arrogance, worse than toxicity. It was abandonment, avoidance. A manager who had been ignoring complaints, dismissing concerns, and enabling everything I despised, not because he was malicious, because he was lazy. Laziness is the most dangerous poison in a company. You can teach skill, you can train behavior, you can correct attitude, but enabling wrongdoing through apathy, that's rot, and rot spreads. I closed the folder carefully, almost tenderly, because I already knew what it meant. "We're restructuring the entire floor," I said. Today. Lauren nodded once. I'll assemble the leadership team. And then she paused. Do you want to observe or lead? I didn't hesitate. Lead. Because last night, Ethan thought I was powerless. Today he would learn I wasn't his little sister in the living room anymore. I was his CEO, and he was about to lose the job he bragged about. The funniest part? He wouldn't realize who fired him until it was already over. Would you tell him up front or let him walk into the meeting blind? By the time the leadership team filed into the glass conference room, the air carried that uneasy stiffness people get when they can feel trouble walking toward them, but can't quite see its face yet. The department heads took their seats, some calm, some jittery, some pretending they weren't curious why the founder, who was technically the founder in eyes, had suddenly called a closed-door meeting before lunch. Ethan hadn't arrived yet. His manager told him he was needed upstairs but didn't say why. I watched the room carefully because knowing who panics before the hammer drops is just as useful as knowing who stands still. Lauren stood at the end of the table with her usual neutral authority, her tablet ready, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to say a word. Everyone already sensed the atmosphere wasn't routine. I didn't waste time on theatrics or soften the blow with small talk. People misbehave more when leadership tiptoes. I began by laying out the results of the internal review patterns, inconsistencies, morale issues, red flags, not with emotion, but with precision. Because nothing is more terrifying than someone who dismantles your entire system with calmness instead of shouting. Some of these patterns, I said, sliding the first file open, aren't one-off mistakes. They are cultural drift. A shift moved across the room, subtle but sharp. Cultural drift. The professional way of saying your team has been rotting quietly while pretending everything smells like roses. I explained the candidate experience reviews, the flagged complaints, the interview dynamics I'd seen firsthand disguised as a job applicant. I described how a handful of employees had turned the hiring process into an arena of ego, not evaluation. And then I watched the exact moment when certain people realized these behaviors weren't anonymous anymore, they were documented. The head of sales, Tom, tried to defend his team, but every sentence he offered wilted under the weight of the files Lauren distributed across the table. His arguments weren't bad, they just weren't rooted in truth anymore. We hold high expectations, he said. We push for excellence. Excellence doesn't include belittling candidates, I replied, or creating an environment where silence replaces feedback. The room grew still. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't about Ethan yet. This was about the people who paved the road he walked on. I opened the red folder, the one containing the manager who let warning signs slide into disasters. I didn't reveal the employee's name yet, but I laid out the consequences of his neglect. Missed interventions, dismissed concerns, a complete lack of leadership accountability. Negligence, I said calmly, isn't passive, it's active damage. The room tensed so tightly I could almost hear thoughts snapping. Lauren handed the manager his official notice, termination effective immediately. He looked stunned, like he'd spent years believing invisibility was immunity, but invisibility is only immunity when no one's watching. I was watching now. When he left, I shifted to the next decision, restructuring the entire interview system, mandatory oversight, blind evaluations, rotational panels, anonymous reporting that bypassed every middleman and forwarded directly to me and Lauren. A few leaders nodded, relieved. Some resisted the change with polite expressions and tight shoulders. But I wasn't creating a democracy. I was protecting an ecosystem. Halfway through the meeting, the glass door slid open. Ethan walked in, late, loud, unaffected, like he had wandered into a casual brainstorming session instead of the most consequential meeting of his career. "Sorry, traffic," he said, though he lived 5 minutes away. He flopped into a chair beside his friend, not even noticing the tension choking the room. His friend whispered something. Ethan snorted. The timing could not have been more poetic. I continued talking without acknowledging him. That's when he finally noticed the files spread across the table. "What's all this?" he asked lightly. "You'll find out," Lauren said, her tone cold enough to frost the glass walls. I opened Ethan's file, but I didn't name him yet. Instead, I walked the room through the issues: disruptions, documented disrespect, performance inconsistencies, passive-aggressive comments captured on recorded Zoom calls, escalation attempts ignored by middle management. People shifted in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable. Others suddenly realized exactly who the behavior sounded like. Ethan's smirk slowly faded. He straightened in his chair, confused. "Wait, who are we talking about?" For the first time, he wasn't joking. For the first time, he sensed danger. For the first time, he wasn't the golden boy in the room. I didn't answer him, not yet. Instead, I explained the company's values: respect, accountability, contribution, and how someone had violated every one of those values. Then I closed the file with deliberate finality. "This individual," I said, "is no longer aligned with the direction of this company. Effective immediately, they are terminated." Ethan blinked at me, his friend blinked at him, and the room collectively held its breath because everyone realized the truth half a second before I said it. "Ethan," I said clearly, "please gather your things." His face drained, his mouth opened. "Wait, me?" "Yes," I replied, "you." He laughed, because panic makes fools of people. "Riley, come on. This is a joke." "I don't joke with payroll," I said flatly, "or with the culture of the company I built." Silence. Total, consuming silence. Ethan stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Like the sister he mocked last night had shape-shifted into someone unrecognizable. A version of me he had never allowed himself to imagine. "You?" he whispered. "You built?" "Yes." I didn't raise my voice. Truth doesn't need volume, it needs clarity. "I'm your boss!" his friend cursed under his breath. Someone else swallowed hard. The realization rippled across the room like a shockwave. The girl Ethan mocked for being jobless was the founder who signed their checks. The one he belittled was the one who created the job he bragged about. The person he underestimated was the one person he should never have crossed. Ethan slumped back in his chair, stunned, humiliated, undone. He had spent years mocking the architect of his own career, and now she was the architect of his unemployment. Before he could speak, I added one final sentence that sealed the moment in history. "HR has already prepared your exit paperwork. Please follow them downstairs." Ethan stood slowly, disbelief written across every inch of his face. He walked out on trembling legs, his friend silent behind him. Once the door closed, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply opened the next file, because firing Ethan wasn't the end. It was the beginning of rebuilding everything he had helped break. And now I had a room full of leaders who understood exactly who they were dealing with. Not the sister they dismissed, not the woman they underestimated. The founder, the CEO, the force they didn't see coming. You tell me, should Ethan get a second chance later in the story, or should he be cut out entirely? The moment Ethan walked out of that glass conference room, the air didn't relax. It tightened, like everyone sensed the ground was still shifting under us and no one wanted to be the next person to slip. Leaders glanced around the table, pretending to focus on their notes while discreetly checking one another's reactions, trying to gauge who might be next, who looked guilty, who looked relieved, who looked terrified. The truth is, whenever the untouchable falls, everyone else suddenly starts checking the foundation under their own feet. I didn't blame them. Ethan had been walking around this place like he was bulletproof because our parents raised him to believe the world would always bend in his direction. But the world bends only for people who build something, not for people who coast on someone else's labor. I wasn't done with the meeting, not by a long shot. Firing Ethan was a consequence, not a conclusion. Now came the structural work, the part where the company either transforms or collapses under the weight of its own denial. "Let's continue," I said, and the room immediately snapped back to focus, like a jolt had gone through the table. I pulled another file forward, one marked with a color no one in the room recognized. I watched their eyes track the label. Curiosity is a powerful motivator, so is fear. "We are restructuring the culture of this organization," I said. "Not because of one person, but because of a pattern we've ignored far too long." Every leader shifted slightly, adjusting posture, adjusting breathing, adjusting the expression they hoped would keep them out of the line of fire. I explained the findings, not just about Ethan's team, but about how subtle toxicity had traveled undetected through laziness, through complacency, through leaders who looked the other way because accountability was inconvenient. I laid out emails that were never escalated, feedback that was softened until it said nothing, and team dynamics reports that were so vague they might as well have been written by ghosts. And then I hit him with the truth. Silence isn't neutrality, it's participation. The room froze. No one flinched, but the oxygen definitely rearranged itself. The director of client relations swallowed hard. The head of implementation stared at the table like it owed him answers. One of the finance leads kept tapping her pen against her notebook until she realized the sound was echoing off the glass walls. I continued, flipping to a new section. "We're implementing new protocols," I said, and I outlined them. Mandatory conflict resolution training, anonymous quarterly culture audits, external oversight on all promotion decisions, and this one made 3 people physically shift in their chairs. A complete reevaluation of leadership roles based on merit and current performance, not tenure or popularity. Tom, the head of sales, opened his mouth like he was going to challenge it, but Lauren simply turned her head and gave him a look that could freeze magma. He closed his mouth. Smart man. "If any of you feel unprepared for this level of transparency," I said, "say so now and we'll discuss replacement options." No one spoke. Not one. Because anyone who says they're unprepared is basically volunteering for decapitation. But their silence wasn't confidence, it was survival instinct. Then the door clicked open again, and for a split second, some people genuinely thought Ethan was coming back to argue. But it was HR. They handed me a folder, nodded, and left. I opened it. "Exit interview completed," I announced. "Company property returned, badge disabled, and..." I glanced up. He asked to speak to me privately afterward. I declined. A visible shockwave moved through the room. Declining a meeting request from your recently fired brother is a very specific kind of statement. One that says the boundary is concrete, not chalk. I set the folder down. Back to work. I transitioned the meeting to the next issue, one that had been brewing long before Ethan joined the company. Data accuracy, missed deadlines, team leads doctoring their KPIs. Each issue came with documentation, timestamps, tracking logs, and screenshots. If anyone had hoped I'd overlook their department while dealing with Ethan, they were painfully mistaken. I called out a product lead for falsifying delivery estimates. I confronted a marketing manager who had covered for a chronically absent coworker. I questioned a technical supervisor who had quietly let his team run itself into chaos rather than confront a difficult employee. Not to humiliate them, not to score points, but because the company I built deserved honesty, and because the company Ethan walked around disrespecting was only one symptom of a larger issue: culture erosion. The COO, Lauren, stepped in and reinforced my words with surgical precision. Her voice was blunt and cold and perfect. "If you don't want accountability," she said, "you don't want leadership. More silence, more uncomfortable shifting, Then I dropped the final bombshell of the meeting. A full audit of every leadership position, external and internal, anonymous employee evaluations, review panels with zero tolerance for favoritism, a brand new performance rubric with sharp edges. And the most shocking part, no one, not even Lauren, was exempt. "What about you?" someone asked before their brain caught up with their mouth. "Audit me first," I said, and the room went dead still, because nothing disarms a potential revolt faster than a leader who volunteers for the same blade everyone else fears. I wrapped up the meeting with instructions, timelines, and expectations. No softness, no apologies, no room for misinterpretation. When everyone filed out afterward, the hallway looked like a battlefield of silent introspection. People were nervous, people were shaken, people were changed. And that's exactly what I wanted, because this wasn't just a company cleanup, this was a reckoning. And the people who didn't see it coming were the ones who needed it most. I returned to my office, closed the door gently, and let the quiet sink in. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, I felt something solid, like all the pieces were finally aligning into a version of the company I always intended to build. But I knew the story wasn't done. Because whenever you remove one person who infected a system, that system has to relearn how to behave without the infection. And sometimes removing the rot only exposes deeper cracks underneath. The next crack appeared faster than I expected, in the form of a text message from Ethan. 5 words that made my jaw clench. "We need to talk. Now." If you were in my position, would you answer or let him sit in the mess he created? I stared at Ethan's text. 5 little words dripping with entitlement. "We need to talk. Now." And for a moment, the anger came back so sharply it felt metallic on my tongue. Not because he wanted to talk, but because even after being fired in front of a room full of leaders, he still assumed he could summon me like some worried big sister who existed to patch his ego. That was the problem with people like Ethan. Consequences were temporary, but their entitlement was eternal. I didn't reply. Instead, I slid my phone face down on the desk and took a slow breath, grounding myself in the silence of my office. The office he used to brag about walking past without knowing I built it, funded it, sacrificed years of sleep for it. My peace lasted exactly 9 seconds before I heard a knock on the door. Not urgent, not polite, just familiar. The kind of knock someone uses when they believe the door already belongs to them. My stomach tightened, because of course he came here. Ethan pushed the door open without waiting for permission, another small behavior that suddenly felt giant in context. He looked disheveled, confused, angry, and somehow still offended, like getting fired publicly was something I had done to ruin his day rather than the direct result of his own action. "So that's it?" he demanded, stepping inside like my office was a stage he deserved to be on. "You humiliated me in front of the whole leadership team? You didn't even give me a chance." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice steady. "I gave you years of chances, Ethan. You just didn't notice because you assumed I'd never hold you accountable." His eyes flickered, confusion blending with disbelief. "Years? What the hell are you talking about? You barely know anything about my work here." "I know everything," I said, "because this startup you joined is mine." He stopped moving. His anger paused mid-breath. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. It was silent inside my office for the first time in minutes, and the silence was delicious. He blinked, processing, trying to stitch together all the moments that never made sense to him. The recruiter who fast-tracked him, the director who always seemed strangely patient with him, the operations team that never fully trusted him, the employees who acted weirdly defensive when he made jokes at their expense. "No," he said finally, shaking his head. "No way. Mom said you didn't even have a job." "Mom says a lot of things," I replied, "especially when it makes her favorite child look shinier The truth hit him like gravity suddenly switched on. He sank into the chair across from me, not because I offered it, but because his legs gave out from confusion. So, all this time, you were my boss? Your boss, I said calmly. Your founder? Your employer? Your payroll signer? Your insurance provider? And now your termination authority. I didn't smile. He didn't deserve that softness. He swallowed. Why didn't you tell anyone? I shrugged. Because I didn't build this company to impress you. I built it so I'd never have to depend on this family again. That was the first moment Ethan looked like he actually saw me. Not the sister he mocked, not the girl our parents dismissed, but a woman who built something he never could. And of course, the second he processed it, his brain flipped back into Dawson family logic. How does this benefit me? So if you're the founder, he asked slowly, you could hire me back? I exhaled sharply. He didn't mean hire me back. He meant undo my consequences. He meant reset the world to the one where I can misbehave without accountability because Riley will protect me. No, I said. One simple word, heavier than anything I'd said all day. He actually flinched. You can't just destroy my career. I didn't destroy anything, I said. You did that every time you treated people like props in your personal comedy routine. The company deserves better. I need this job, he whispered. And for the first time, there was no arrogance. Just fear. But not the right kind of fear. Not the kind that comes from reflection. It was the kind that comes from losing comfort. Then you should have acted like it mattered, I replied. He leaned forward. Riley, please, I can change. I studied him, really studied him, the posture, the desperation, the sudden remorse that wasn't remorse at all, just self-preservation wearing a cheap disguise. You're not here because you want to change, I said. You're here because you got caught. His jaw tightened. If you tell Mom and Dad, I laughed, actually laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. Nothing. They already think I'm nothing. Telling them the truth wouldn't hurt me. It would only hurt the image they built of you. That landed deep. He sank further into the chair. So what now? He asked, like I was sentencing him. What happens to me? That depends on what you do next, I said. You can either take this as the lesson you avoided all your life, or you can prove everyone who doubted you was right. He swallowed again, like the words were heavy enough to choke. He looked around my office, at the whiteboard covered in product roadmaps, at the awards on the shelf, at the employee thank you notes pinned on the corkboard, all the things he never realized belonged to me. I never thought, he began, then stopped. You never thought I could be more than the kid you teased? I finished. He nodded, shame spreading across his expression. Real shame or strategic shame? I wasn't sure, yet now you know, I said. He stood slowly, something humbled or maybe broken in the way he carried himself. At the door, he hesitated. Riley, do you hate me? I took a breath, a long, honest breath. No, I said, but I finally stopped sacrificing myself to protect you. He nodded once, a small defeated motion, and then he left. The door clicked shut behind him. I stared at the empty space he left behind, the ghost of years of resentment dissolving into something heavier, disappointment mixed with relief. But I didn't have time to sit in the emotion, because firing Ethan wasn't the end of the storm. It was the opening crack in a wall ready to collapse. And the next person standing behind that wall was worse. Because as soon as Ethan left, 2 new messages hit my phone, one from HR, one from a senior employee, both saying the same thing. We need to talk. It's about your brother and what he left behind. If someone you fired left a secret behind, would you open the door to it or burn it before it destroys everything? The moment I saw those 2 messages, one from HR, one from a senior engineer with the subject line, urgent, you need to see this, I knew Ethan hadn't simply walked out defeated. He'd left debris behind, the kind that doesn't just settle quietly but grows teeth in the dark. I opened the engineer's message first. It was short, too short for comfort. Riley, something came up in access logs this morning. Not a mistake, not random. You need to come downstairs. That's when my stomach tightened in a way firing him never had. Because firing someone, even your brother, is simple. It's clean. It's a decision you can defend. But the aftermath? That's where the real mess waits. The kind you don't see until someone pulls back the curtain. I grabbed my laptop and walked to the elevator, feeling the floor hum beneath my shoes as the car descended. On my way down, HR called. Again. I answered, my voice steady. What did he do? There was a pause on the other end, the kind HR only uses when the next sentence is going to ruin someone's week. We detected a mass download from Ethan's credentials at 11:43 p.m. last night, she said. Client files, internal documentation, proprietary data. It wasn't flagged until this morning because the firewall logged it as staff activity. I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course he didn't just take his humiliation and leave. Of course he lashed out the only way people like Ethan do, not with introspection but retaliation. But she wasn't done. We also found messages, she said carefully. Slack threads between Ethan and several employees on his team. It looks like he had been grooming loyalty or something close to it. I didn't respond because I already knew the pattern. Ethan didn't create loyalty. He created dependency. False alliances built on jokes, pressure, and a sense of us versus them, a tactic he learned at home years before he brought it into my company. Send everything to me, I said tightly. I'm heading to engineering. I stepped off the elevator and followed the senior engineer, Devin, to a corner room I rarely entered. That alone said everything. The room was for emergency audits, the kind you pray you never need. Devin locked the door and projected the logs onto the wall, rows of timestamps, massive data pulls. Repeated access to restricted folders Ethan had no business opening. How much did he take? I asked. Enough that if he tries to use it, we'll know, Devin said, but enough to be a problem if we don't act immediately. He did this last night? Right before you fired him, Devin said, almost like he expected something to go wrong today. That's when I realized Ethan hadn't just been arrogant, he'd been preparing, imagining a scenario where he'd be embarrassed, confronted, or held accountable. He didn't know what for, but he knew someone else would take the fall before him. Maybe he planned to blame it on a teammate. Maybe he planned to sell the data. Maybe he just wanted to feel powerful after a lifetime of people cushioning his failures. But the why didn't matter now. The damage did. We're isolating the breach, Devin said, watching me carefully. But before we move forward, there's something else. He opened a folder labeled with Ethan's initials. Photos appeared, screenshots, messages. Whole threads of him mocking colleagues privately, belittling new hires, joking about people's insecurities, encouraging others to pile on. Every single message dripping with cruelty disguised as camaraderie. And worse, several employees responded. Not many, but enough to reveal a problem that went deeper than I thought. We can trace who participated, Devin said. We can also trace who stayed silent. Silence isn't guilt, I said automatically. No, Devin said, but silence tells you who felt powerless. I stared at that screen and felt something dark and familiar rise inside me. Not revenge, not anger, but clarity. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This wasn't about a brother who failed upward his whole life until the first time he hit a wall and decided to claw his way out with someone else's hands. This was about culture. Mine. My company. Something I built from nothing now had a crack running down its center, one my own brother helped carve. And my responsibility wasn't to him. It was to every person who came to work believing they were safe, supported, and respected. "We need a full investigation," I said finally. "Every log, every thread, every person affected by this." "Already in motion," Devin replied. There was a beat of silence. Then he asked the one question no one else dared ask. "Do you want us to notify your family that Ethan might face charges?" I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was complicated. Ethan wasn't a monster, just a man raised in a house where consequences were optional, accountability was negotiable, and love was conditional. But none of that excused what he'd done. "No," I said. "Not yet," because I knew something Devin didn't. A lawsuit was protection for my company. Accountability was protection for the people he hurt. But my family, they were a different battlefield, and I needed to handle that on my own terms. I walked back to my office, feeling the weight of every step. The light outside shifted toward evening, casting longer shadows across the floor. Fitting, because shadows were exactly where Ethan operated best, quietly, carelessly, convinced no one could see him. But he forgot one thing. I grew up in the same house. I knew every shadow he hid in because I spent years hiding in them too. My phone buzzed. A new message. From my mother. "Your brother said you humiliated him. Fix this." I stared at the screen. No greeting, no question, no curiosity about my side. Just an order, just an assumption that I was the one who created the problem. Just the same dynamic our family had always followed. Ethan breaks it, Riley cleans it. Not this time. Not in this chapter of my life. Not when the stakes weren't emotional, they were legal, financial, and catastrophic. I closed the message without replying because the next step wasn't to comfort my mother, soothe my father, or spare my brother. The next step was a step they never saw coming. I sat down, opened a blank email, and began typing the notice that would shift the entire foundation of the company and my family in ways they would never recover from. Because Ethan didn't just break a rule, he burned a bridge. And before the night ended, everyone involved would learn exactly what happens when someone mistakes my silence for weakness. And the real question is, if you discovered your brother committed the one unforgivable betrayal at your company, would you protect him or expose him? I stared at the blank email draft, the cursor blinking like it was daring me to decide what kind of person I was going to be in the next 5 minutes. Someone who let family ties excuse corporate sabotage, or someone who understood that leadership sometimes meant cutting blood before it infected the whole body. And as I began typing the formal notice to initiate a full internal misconduct review, with Ethan Dawson listed as the primary subject and his entire team flagged for collateral assessment, I felt something inside me shift from hurt to resolve. This wasn't revenge. This was responsibility. This was what real adulthood looked like, the version no one prepares you for, where loving your family and holding them accountable were two opposite roads, and you finally chose the one that didn't destroy everyone else in the process. I finished the notice, proofread it twice, then hit send. No dramatic music, no cathartic release, just a quiet click that felt heavier than any fight we ever had growing up. Within minutes, Lauren, my COO, responded asking if she should prepare for emergency leadership protocols. I wrote back, yes, all of them. When I stepped out of my office, the building felt different, like the walls themselves could sense the tension running through every floor. Employees were working quietly, some more hunched than usual, some whispering in corners. Word was already spreading. Not the details, but the shift. Companies always know when the ground moves. The energy changes before the explanations arrive. I headed for the executive floor, where Lauren was already gathering department heads. She looked at me with the kind of expression people reserve for situations they know will become stories told for years. "It's going to be messy," she said quietly. "It's already messy," I replied. "Now we're just cleaning." When the meeting started, I didn't ease into anything. I projected Ethan's access logs across the screen, letting the numbers speak before I did. Then I displayed the Slack threads, the humor that wasn't humor, the targeted comments disguised as team building, the coercive camaraderie framed as harmless banter. No one in the room breathed. No one dared to look away. When his downloaded data list appeared, someone muttered, "This is federal level bad." I didn't respond. They were right. It was. "Here's what happens next," I said, my voice level. "We lock his access permanently. We secure every folder touched in that breach. We prepare statements for legal precaution, and we start interviewing every employee who interacted with him in the last 90 days. "And your brother?" someone asked carefully. "He'll receive the official notice today," I said. "We're treating him like any other employee who violated trust at this scale." No one objected. No one questioned my resolve. It was the benefit and the curse of being the founder. Your authority is unquestioned, even when your heart is breaking behind the confidence. The meeting lasted an hour, but the consequences would stretch far longer. When it ended, I walked back to my office and found another message on my phone. This one from my father. 4 words, cold and predictable. "Fix what you did." I laughed under my breath, not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully on brand. In that moment, I realized exactly why Ethan behaved the way he did. He came from a system where accountability never touched him. He wasn't taught consequences, and he was insulated from them. And now he was shocked, offended even, that real life didn't bend the same way our parents did. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the misconduct notice to Ethan's personal email with one line, "You'll hear from HR shortly." It took him exactly 7 minutes to call. I didn't answer. It took him 2 minutes after that to text. "What is this? Are you serious? This could ruin me." Another text. "Riley, answer me." And another. "You're overreacting. This is insane." And then the real one, the one he should have led with, instead of rage. "Please, don't do this." For the first time, I felt something break. Not my resolve, but that tiny leftover instinct to protect him. I closed the messages, not because I didn't care, but because caring wasn't the same as enabling. 15 minutes later, HR confirmed he received the official notice. 10 minutes after that, security revoked his building badge. But the real explosion, the one none of us anticipated, arrived in the form of a frantic knock at my office door. It was Mia, the former employee who'd left months earlier because of Ethan's behavior. She was shaking, not physically unsafe, but emotionally unraveling in the way people do when carrying too much truth for too long. "I didn't know who else to talk to," she said, her voice trembling. "But Ethan, he contacted me." Every muscle in my body tightened. "When?" "Last night," she whispered. "After business hours. He told me if anyone from the company asked about him, I should say he never made me uncomfortable. And he asked if I still had access to old files." The room spun. This wasn't just breach-level misconduct. This was intimidation. Witness tampering, a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative before the truth surfaced. "Do you have the messages?" I asked. She nodded and handed me her phone. The texts were exactly what I feared. Pressure wrapped in politeness, manipulation hiding behind punctuation. "You should know," she added quietly. "He told at least 3 others the same thing." I took a slow breath, a very slow one, because this wasn't just a corporate scandal anymore. It was a contamination, something toxic spreading through corners of a company I built with the intention of doing good, a company I imagined would be healthier than the home I grew up in. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She nodded, but she wasn't done. "There's something else," she whispered. "He said if you pushed this, he'd make sure your family turned against you completely." I almost laughed. Not because it wasn't serious, but because Ethan still didn't understand something fundamental. I had already survived my family turning against me. That was the reason the company existed. That was why I built a life where I answered to no one, depended on no one, and rose without anyone noticing. "You're safe now," I told her. "I promise." But inside, something darkened, a shift from responsibility to inevitability. This wasn't going to end with a termination. This wasn't going to stay inside the company. Ethan had crossed into legal territory, ethical territory, personal territory, and like all betrayals, this one had a final chapter. One that wasn't written yet, one that would expose the truth on every page. And as I walked her out of my office, knowing what I had to do next, one question thundered in my mind. If your own brother threatened your company, your employees, and your future, how far would you go to stop him? The moment Mia left my office, the atmosphere in the entire building shifted again. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavy in that way offices get when everyone can sense something big is happening behind closed doors. I closed the door gently, leaned against it for 1 second, and let the weight of her words settle into place like bricks in a wall I didn't realize I'd been building. Witness tampering, pressure, intimidation. And on top of that, the blatant attempt to weaponize my family against me, as if they hadn't already spent years doing that on their own. I walked to my desk, powered up my monitor, and opened a blank document with the deliberate calm of someone about to file a lawsuit and write a eulogy in the same breath. Because this wasn't just an employee problem anymore, it wasn't even a family problem. This was now a legal liability sitting directly under my last name, threatening everything I had built, brick by brick, while everyone assumed I was simply the sibling who didn't have a real job. I pulled the misconduct logs together, attaching Mia's screenshots, timestamp verification, the Slack messages, the download records, every piece of evidence strong enough to withstand scrutiny from lawyers, regulators, and courtrooms. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I was assembling truth in its sharpest possible form. By the time I finished compiling the file, 133 pages of documented behavior, it felt less like paperwork and more like an obituary for the career my brother thought he was entitled to simply by existing. I sent the packet to our legal counsel with a note. Schedule an emergency meeting. This cannot wait. Within seconds, my phone lit up with a response, on my way. While I waited, I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with Ethan over the last few years, every time he laughed when I mentioned struggling, every time he dismissed my stress because I didn't know what real pressure felt like, every time he assumed my success was luck, timing, or someone else's work. And then the most ridiculous irony of all, the man who mocked me for years was now the one who believed I wouldn't hold him accountable. As if incompetence became immunity when wrapped in sibling status. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. It was Daniel, our in-house counsel, files tucked under his arm, expression sharpened in a way that told me he'd already skimmed what I sent. He closed the door behind him. "I'll be blunt," he said, taking a seat. "This is bad. How bad? The kind that triggers board involvement if it isn't handled perfectly, the kind that opens the door to lawsuits from former employees, the kind that gets whistleblowers involved if we misstep even once." He flipped through pages rapidly. "But let me tell you something even more important. Your brother crossed into criminal territory the moment he contacted Mia, and if the others confirm similar outreach, that's not just misconduct. That's obstruction." I nodded, letting the reality land. "So what's our next move?" He leaned forward. "We terminate him immediately. No severance, no exit benefits, no references. Then," he paused, "we notify the board preemptively and establish a protective record that you, as founder, initiated corrective action without bias or hesitation." "Bias," I repeated with a humorless laugh. "If anything, I've been biased in his favor for too long." Daniel didn't deny it. "Family complicates liability," he said. "But you've documented everything, and the fact that he pressured a former employee, that alone justifies decisive action." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not grief, not fear, but the final snap of a rope I'd been gripping for years. "Prepare the paperwork," I said, "today." He nodded and stood to leave, but before he reached the door, he turned back. "You should be ready," he said softly. "People like him don't go quietly." As soon as he left, I went straight to HR. The director looked up the second I walked in, eyes wide, because she had already seen the misconduct alert I sent earlier. "Is it true?" she asked. "Everything in the file?" "Yes," I said. "And more is coming." She swallowed hard. "Okay, then we'll support whatever decision you make. But you should know, his whole team is in a panic downstairs. Someone tipped them off." Of course they were. When the tree shakes, the rotten branches always tremble first. "We'll address them after the termination," I decided. "No communication until the process is complete." She nodded and went to prepare the official documents. And then came the part I had been dreading without admitting it to myself, calling security. Not because I thought Ethan would get violent, but because asking someone to escort your own brother out of the building is a kind of emotional violence all its own. But I made the call, clearly, calmly, professionally. The head of security didn't flinch. "We'll handle it discreetly," he promised. As I walked back to my office, the building felt heavier with every step, not tense, expectant. Like everyone sensed they were hours away from a story they'd tell to every new hire for the next 10 years. The kind that started with, "I was there the day the founder fired her own brother." But before the official termination could begin, my office phone rang. Not my cell, my direct corporate line. Very few people had that number. I answered cautiously. "Riley speaking." Silence. Then a voice I knew instantly, Ethan, except not the loud, mocking version of him. This voice was small, panicked. "Riley, I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "Before anything happens." My jaw tightened. "This isn't the time," I said. "You should be talking to HR." "No," he whispered urgently. "I need to explain. You don't know everything. There's more to it." There it was, the attempt to rewrite reality, the desperate scramble for an alternate narrative, the beginning of his defense, one that would come far too late, because everything he'd done, everything he'd said, everything he'd tried to hide was already written in unshakable ink. "Ethan," I said slowly, "whatever story you're about to give me won't change the evidence. Just listen," he pleaded. "Please. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't think you'd actually go this far." "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because you're my sister." A silence stretched between us, long, thin, painful. And in that moment, I realized the truth he could never see. He weaponized our family bond when it benefited him. And now he wanted to hide behind it. "I'll hear whatever you want to say," I finally answered, but not privately, not off record, not without HR present. He exhaled, defeated. "So that's it? You're really doing this?" "No," I said quietly. "You did this." And as I hung up the phone, the building seemed to tilt, not literally, but in the way reality shifts right before something irreversible happens. Because the next conversation with Ethan wouldn't be a reunion or a confrontation. It would be the moment he learned exactly who I really was and exactly what I was capable of when pushed too far. The conference room felt colder than usual when HR, legal counsel, security, and I assembled inside it, each of us carrying a different piece of the truth my brother still believed he could outrun. The table was lined with documents, evidence, signatures, timestamps, everything that would expose not just his behavior, but the ecosystem of arrogance he'd built around himself. The door opened and Ethan stepped in with the same confidence he always wore when he believed the world revolved around him. But it cracked the moment he saw who was sitting at the head of the table. Me. Not the sister he dismissed, not the jobless sibling, not the family doormat. Me. The founder, the employer, the woman who had built every paycheck he had ever collected in this building. His eyes flicked between the HR director, the legal counsel, the security officer by the door. His bravado evaporated. "What is this?" he demanded, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." He didn't move at first. Then, very slowly, he obeyed, trying to piece together a version of reality where this meeting wasn't about him. "We're here to discuss several violations of company policy," the HR director began, her tone neutral and precise, including misconduct, harassment, retaliation, and interference with a witness. Ethan flinched visibly. "Witness? What witness?" I opened the folder and slid the first page toward him. Mia's verified statement, the one he had tried to bury. He stared at it, then at me, disbelief crawling across his expression like he couldn't comprehend that his actions actually had consequences. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, though his hands shook. "She's lying. I was just joking around, okay? You know how sensitive people get. He's not the only one," I said calmly. "And this isn't about sensitivity. It's about documented behavior." The HR director laid out more statements, more screenshots, more recordings. Ethan's face drained with each sheet of paper. He reached for one like he might tear it in half, and security stepped forward, not touching him but close enough to remind him he wasn't in control here. Daniel, our counsel, leaned forward. "Additionally, you contacted a former employee after being made aware of an internal audit. That is considered interference. Depending on the extent, it can escalate into criminal liability." "Criminal?" Ethan choked out. "Are you serious?" "Deadly," Daniel replied. Ethan turned to me then, desperate. "Riley, come on. You're really going to let them talk to me like this? I'm your brother." It was the same line he used every time he needed a favor, an excuse, a shield. But this time, it didn't move me. "What you did affected real people," I said. "Your position didn't make you untouchable. It made you responsible." "I didn't know it was your company," he blurted. "If I'd known..." "If you'd known," I cut in sharply, "you would have acted different? You would have treated people decently only if you knew the person in charge shared your last name? That's not a defense, Ethan. That's the problem." He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it because he knew I was right. The HR director slid the final set of documents toward him. Termination papers, next steps, instructions for returning company equipment. His face crumbled. "You're firing me?" he whispered, as if the idea existed outside the laws of nature. "Effective immediately," she confirmed. His breath came unevenly, tapping between disbelief and fury. "You can't fire me. You can't do this to me." "I can," I said softly. "And I am." That broke something in him. He slammed his hand on the table, rising from the chair in an explosion of movement, only for security to step between us, firm but controlled. He froze, chest heaving, eyes burning with humiliation and betrayal, not because of what he did, because of what was happening to him. "So that's it?" he hissed. "You're choosing strangers over your own family?" I stood slowly, not raising my voice, not matching his anger. Because real power doesn't yell, it lands. "I'm choosing integrity," I said, "and if you'd had any, we wouldn't be here." His jaw locked, his eyes glossed over. And then, quietly, "They're going to blame me for this. Mom and Dad are going to tear me apart." I didn't soften. "You didn't need my help with that," I said. "You built this mess yourself." HR signaled gently, "We'll escort you to gather your things." Ethan let out a hollow laugh, disbelief twisting into something ugly. "My friends," he muttered. "You fired them too?" "They participated in misconduct," I answered. "They're adults. They made choices just like you." He shook his head like the truth was too heavy for his ego to carry. Security gestured toward the door. He hesitated, staring at me one last time, as if searching for a version of me that still saw him the way I did years ago. but that version was gone. He walked out, chin trembling, posture uneven, the fall of a man who'd never imagined gravity applied to him. As the door closed behind him, the silence that washed over the room didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary, cleansing, final. The HR director exhaled slowly. "Are you okay?" "I will be," I said, and I meant it. I returned to my office, sat in my chair, and let the quiet sink into my bones. The company would move on, the culture would reset, and Ethan would finally learn that family doesn't erase accountability. Minutes later, my phone buzzed, a text from my mother, only 4 words, "What did you do?" I stared at it, feeling a strange peace settle in. For once, I didn't owe them a single explanation. I typed back, "What he earned," and hit send.